Hey everybody, wanted to give you just a quick video going over the rhetorical analysis essay assignment and addressing some of your questions from the discussion board from last week with that, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. The rhetorical analysis essay can be maybe the most difficult essay of the semester, so I want to go through, address some of your questions, but also just point some things out with the assignment, but also run through the sample essay as well. So let's start with the actual assignment. Again, this is 20% of your final grade. First draft is due this coming Friday, so you want to make sure that you have at least 4 paragraphs for that first draft and that you have it posted to the Blackboard discussion board by midnight on Friday. Second draft is going to be due 10 days later on July 16th. So that again needs to be a minimum of 7 paragraphs. And so really your job with a rhetorical analysis is to evaluate the quality of an argument. So you're supposed to choose one of these essays, so just one, and basically make your own argument about whether the argument in the essay, whether you choose David Brooks's essay, Rosen's essays, Manny's essays, McWhorter's essay, or Ollie's essay, whether their essay works or not with their intended audience. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that, and we'll get into some of the things that I want you to look at and evaluate. But ultimately, the thesis of your own rhetorical analysis essay should basically answer a yes or no question. Is this argument convincing to its intended audience? Yes or no. And then your job as the writer is to explain how you got to that answer. Why is it convincing? Why is it not convincing? One of the questions that we got during the discussion board is, well, do we need to be clearly citing with whether it was weak or strong, or should we go into detail about the strengths and the weaknesses of it? It's a really good question, and I will tell you that a good rhetorical analysis should look at both strengths and weaknesses. So all arguments have strengths, all arguments have weaknesses. Your job is to explain what those strengths and weaknesses are, why you think they're strengths, why you think they're weaknesses, and then to convince your own audience that they should view those things as strengths and weaknesses as well. So again, going through the actual assignment, if you haven't seen it, I do want to kind of direct your attention to Appendix A. So these are tools for rhetorical analysis, and a lot of them are basically questions. What does the author hope to achieve? What is the author's motivation? Obviously, these things aren't spelled out in the essay, so you kind of have to infer and use some of the tools that we've done or that we've used in the summary essay and the love song essay. These, though, are going to be your big ones. So we've got a little bit of practice at looking at rhetorical appeals like ethos, pathos, and logos. In your own rhetorical analysis, you should absolutely cover your author's use of ethos, pathos, and logos, and then to say, whether the appeal to ethos works, whether it hurts the argument, or whether it helps the argument. Tone is also something that we've looked at for a couple essays. That's going to be another important piece of the argument. Some of you guys looked at Manny and McWhorter's tones in their own essays to see whether they help their argument or whether they hurt their argument. And as you're kind of going through and looking at each one of these things, ethos, pathos, logos, tone, structure, your ultimate question that you should keep coming back to in your own essay is, does this thing help the argument or does it hurt the argument? So a lot of you guys pointed out, for instance, David Brooks's use of pathos. He references 9/11 right off the beginning of the essay. Does that help his argument become convincing to his audience, or does it actually hurt the argument to his audience? Those are all things you're going to have to think about and consider as a writer in this essay. So I do want you to kind of take a look at these questions. You could almost think about each one of these bullet point questions as recipes for paragraphs. So you could write a paragraph about ethos, pathos, logos. You could write a paragraph about tone. One of the things that you're going to have to do a little bit of in this essay is to do a quick summary of the essay and identify what the main argument is. So what is the writer trying to convince his or her audience of, but also who that audience is. And these are all things that we've done in the summary essay. So that's the assignment here. You can see again a very similar grading rubric, but I want to jump over to the rhetorical analysis sample essay, and so this is an essay that actually covers an essay not on our list or for the assignment, but I want you to take a look really quickly at the thesis. The thesis a little kind of hard to find, but if you went looking for it, it might be something like this. Klein conveys her opinion by informing the reader about branding and how it promotes the self-image. Klein uses logos and pathos to connect to the reader, yet is not forcing her opinion on the reader by hiding her thesis statement. So you can see that right off the bat, this particular rhetorical analysis is going to concern itself with how Klein uses logos, how Klein uses pathos, and kind of the structure of the essay. It doesn't come right out and say whether it's a convincing argument or not, and that maybe is one of the weaknesses of this particular sample essay. But one of the things I want you to look at is the topic sentences, those first sentences for these body paragraphs. This is a really well-structured essay, and I think you can kind of take a look at the sample and use that as a way to think about structuring your own essay. We can see this paragraph here is going to concern themselves with logos. This one is about pathos. This one is about kind of where her thesis statement is. And then the essay wraps up with its conclusion saying, you know, the argument is brilliant, so obviously they think it's convincing. But this is a really well-structured rhetorical analysis, and this should give you some ideas of what you want to shoot for in your own rhetorical analysis. A couple more of the questions that I wanted to go over. One of the things that's possible with this is that you may find yourself disagreeing with an argument and still saying it's a strong argument. So many times people will say, well, you know, I disagree with McWhorter, but I think he made a good argument. And that's totally fine, because this essay isn't about whether you agree with it or disagree with it, or whether you think it's right or wrong. It's about whether the argument is made in a good way. So there are arguments that we personally may disagree with that we can acknowledge are strong arguments. Just conversely, there are arguments that we would agree with that we would say, yeah, I agree with that argument, that we can also acknowledge, well, that's actually not made in the best way. So it's definitely possible to disagree with an argument, but to acknowledge that the argument is sound or is made in a good way. So all of this is opinion. So this is based on your opinion, but it's based on your ability to convince your own reader of your opinion. A lot of times people have trouble with the thesis statement with this. So let me just kind of put this in front of you really quickly. Your thesis statement should really answer two main questions. The first one is the author's argument convincing to their intended audience? You may say yes, no, or some combination of there, but that's the position. That's what you're going to be arguing in your own rhetorical analysis. The reasoning, though, is where things get interesting. Why is the author's argument convincing or unconvincing? So why is it a weak argument? Why is it a strong argument? And that's really where you want to take a look at ethos, pathos, logos, tone, all that stuff. So again, these are just some thoughts about the actual rhetorical analysis. If you have trouble, if you have questions, please feel free to email me. But hopefully you found some of this useful as you're sitting down to write your own first drafts of the rhetorical analysis.